Hi there, it's Courtney from Anti-Cancer Mom, and welcome to my very first interview ever. And I'm welcoming today AJ Lanigan, the formulator and manufacturer of a product I have taken for 14 years now, Beta 1 3D Glucan, and he is going to answer some of my questions I've had over the years and some of yours too. So welcome, AJ.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here. I'm alive, awake, alert, and enthusiastic, and ready to share, some pearl of wisdom to help you, family, friends, loved ones. Got a lot to talk about, but the important thing is that people come away from this with at least one thing that's going to help them. Again, are the people that they're close to.
Sure. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself so we know that we can trust you with this.
Okay.
Although
Yep.
I know I can. I've known you for many years and have asked you questions over the years. So just tell us a little about yourself.
Born and raised right here in central South Carolina, right across the river, actually, from where my office is located, just outside of Lexington. Attended Lexington High School, played a lot of sports growing up. A lot of the country wisdom that I share with people comes from, of course, my mom and dad. We lived on a small farm. My dad was born in 1910. My mom in 1916. My dad bragged about getting through the 4th grade, my mom through the 11th grade. But again, they came up during a period of time where if you weren't smart, you probably didn't fare very well. So a lot of my upbringing was from people who had lived through, arguably some of the roughest times this country has ever seen. I then went to University of South Carolina School of Pharmacy. After being there not too long, I determined, boy, that's all this stuff will kill you. Just some kills you a little bit slower than others. One of my earlier professors had been a practicing pharmacist and then pharmacy professor. And then actually I had him in pre-pharmacy right before he retired. And in the course of him teaching, he's giving information about the history of pharmacy. And one of his comments was, many of the drugs that we are prescribing today are actually dealing with the side effects of drugs that we might have prescribed 10, 15, 20 years ago. So there's a reason they keep that stuff locked up, okay? You can't just put everything out there with the breath mints. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people that take, the simplest of over-the-counter drugs and turn them into, some serious dope, as we would have said when I was a kid. Very dangerous. And so keeping things normally you would get for a cold or a stopped up nose locked up is a sign more of the times than it is what the materials themselves are. I think over the years, I've learned a great deal from a lot of different people, a lot smarter than me, medical doctors, PhDs, people that are the tops in their field at major universities, teaching hospitals, not only here in America, but in other parts of the world. We now enjoy distribution in some 65 plus countries around the world with my ingredient, and enjoy having traveled to a lot of these places, meeting people just like yourself who have your own personal stories to tell, stories about their family and loved ones. One of my trips to Japan had to do with a gentleman who bought the product for his mother who had breast cancer. And she wasn't doing very well at all. And she started getting better and better and better. And he introduced the product to his company that he worked for, which had nothing to do with the food supplement industry, a multi-billion-dollar company. And now they import our ingredient into Japan and actually export it to other parts of Southeast Asia. I didn't get to go to Vietnam compliments of the United States government when I was a kid, but was invited back there just a couple of years ago, and had a meeting with some 400 plus medical doctors, pharmacists, who, I don't speak Vietnamese very well. In fact, not much at all. But we had 4 interpreters that were doing a great job. My mom said I was vaccinated with a phonograph needle. You young folks, you'll have to look up what a phonograph is. But the gist is that they were there very interested in an ingredient that could help primarily their cancer patients. That's where a lot of the work has been done, particularly the early, 20, 25, 30 years work in this field. And so as I travel to Vietnam, to Japan, to Croatia, to Europe, we've had the South Carolina Department of Commerce sponsor a whirlwind trip across multiple countries. I've had to undergo a lot of background checks over the years, presenting a lot, letters from the university, all this stuff, who I am, my background, and so forth. But I think that the testimony to who I am, where I come from, can you trust me, really speaks for itself, in that I've got the same customers. You're one of them. Back 14, 15 years ago, 18 years ago, 20 years ago, 25 years ago. I've watched their kids be born in some cases, and now adults who are now having their children. I get all these Christmas cards, but I think when I'm dead and gone and forgotten, the ingredient is still going to be here. And the part that I play is to make absolutely sure that it's, number one, the safest ingredient that it can possibly be. In fact, the window of safety is so large, it would be hard to describe. Probably safer than the water that a lot of people drink. And then the second thing is, does it work? Is it effective? Is there benefit for using it? What if I'm not sick? What if I don't have cancer? What if I don't have COVID? All these what ifs. Is there an advantage there? And we have found that absolutely there's an advantage. In fact, the biggest advantage that I've come to bring to people is helping to support the immune system before the devil's head pops up.
Yes.
It's a thing that a lot of people just don't think about. The immune system, definitely don't understand much of it, but people yet will floss and brush their teeth. Why do they do that? If you eat the good food, stay away from the bad food, you get plenty of rest, you say your prayers, you do all these things, why do you have to do something extra like floss and brush your teeth? Well, because you don't want your teeth to fall out, okay? You don't want periodontal disease. The same is true of the immune system. Right. You can eat, drink, do all those things, go to all the right meetings. It still requires its own unique form of support. And to ignore that, believe me, in the long run, it'll be a lot worse than not brushing and flossing your teeth. So I think anyone could easily Google AJ Lanigan. You're going to get a lot of hits. In fact, the most common thing people say, "Boy, you own the internet, don't you?" I said, well, I got a lot of people out there that like the product. They're reselling the product, and a lot of testimonials out there, but also the tremendous amount of peer-reviewed medical literature published in PubMed, which is a massive library, again, where these medical doctors, PhDs, and institutions, not only here in the US, but around the world, are publishing on my ingredient, naming it by name, by the way. That is a rare thing.
Meaning transfer
And
point.
the transfer point,
Yeah.
they'll see the 300, which is the trade name
Yeah.
of the ingredient, because we have the 300 beta glucan as a standalone in 100 and 500 milligram dose. We've also combined it with things like selenium, resveratrol, vitamin C, and so forth.
Yeah.
Why do we do that? Well, because when we test our material, again, in these third-party disinterested groups, they find, okay, it's far superior than vitamin C, it's far superior than selenium, again, in the area of supporting the immune system, fighting cancer, fighting infectious disease. You know, the immune system, it's like a massive umbrella that protects you from all these things that are in you, on you, and around you, trying to get you all the time. And so without that immune system and without it working at its peak, then that's when we befall some of the worst of things, certainly cancer, but people that didn't do so well with COVID. You know, again, their immune systems fail them. All these things that people end up, now we're not talking about somebody's in an automobile wreck, but we're talking about your typical cancer, infectious disease, allergies, healing processes, aging. All of these things are mitigated in part, in some cases, in toto, by the immune system, or shall I say, the immune response. So getting all this combined, it wouldn't have gotten done, you know, if I was Jeffrey Dahmer or somebody. I had to bring that up, but there's a lot of there is a lot of, shall we say, snake oil and snake oil salesmen in the industry of food supplements. So I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to not so much pat myself on the back.
No.
Simply say there's a track record out there that's not difficult to follow. Like I say, just Google AJ Lanigan, beta glucan, and, you know, massage your eyes for a little bit, because you're going to be reading.
And well, just like people that have read my blog, I mean, I've been doing that since 2011, and they've kind of seen over the years, this beta glucan is the only product that I have stuck with for 14 years consistently. And I will say this, that I have had negative reactions, whether it's just a natural bodily response, like if you take too much magnesium, for example, you'll have, you know, that kind of bodily response, or if you're taking too much iron or whatever. But with beta glucan, I've never had a side effect from beta glucan. So, and I've known you for many years, that we've, you know, touched base here and there, and I always have hard questions for you, and you've always been able to answer them, because I think I'm naturally a skeptic. I know people, when they are on cancer protocols, they have limited funds, and beta glucan is a well-made quality product here in the US, and it's not cheap. You know, it's not a cheap supplement. It's a quality, well-made supplement, and there are great deals. You can get them. I know that I always get mine on Black Friday because you can get bundles and things like that, but you just want to make sure that it's working. So I guess for my next question, we can kind of combine the question of what does beta glucan, how does it help your immune system, and what is it doing? And then, of course, how can we measure that in somebody? How can we make sure, both, I guess, in your studies, just, you know, use your science words and answer that question for us, like fourth grade level.
Okay.
If you get maybe a little splatter of, you know, some postgraduate lingo.
Yeah, the simplest way to measure, from my perspective, and having observed people using and not using, or using, stopping use, and then figuring out maybe I shouldn't have stopped, because that's probably where the rubber meets the road in the most definitive way. Because you can go into the doctor's office, for example, testing blood sugar at a certain time of the day, or if you fasted or if you've not fasted. and you're going to get a number, you could go back 6 hours later, get an entirely different number. So there are ways that are tested when we do medical studies that are consistent, so that we are not, again, dealing with ebbs and flows of subjects in their life and what they had to eat and so forth. So you have, we call it controls.
Right.
You have a baseline, and you say, okay, under this baseline, and this is probably one of the best ways that people can understand. If I'm healthy, again, I'm eating the good food, staying away from the bad food, getting my rest, doing all the things that mama and grandmama told me to do, and staying away from the bad, and you use this product, do you see any difference? Actually, that can be measured. There's certain blood work, a lot of it, that blood work, and I don't want to get too far into tall weeds, we can actually measure where your immune response is. And what we found using one particular test, we look at your neutrophils. And if you go to the doctor and you do your typical blood work, you'll see NEU. That's abbreviation for neutrophils. It's the most abundant of all your white blood cells. You've got literally trillions and trillions and trillions of these cells. Their half-life, 6 to 8 hours. So this time tomorrow, both of us will have a complete turnover in these tens of trillions of just one type of white blood cell. So let's use that as an example. A perfectly healthy person is going to have about 30%, less than a third actually, of all those white blood cells respond in the face of a challenge. Okay? Now, we give a little bit of beta glucan. It goes up from 30, 31%, maybe up to about 38%. We give a little bit more, we can raise it up to around 40%. We give a little bit more, it'll raise up. And these are things that we've done hundreds and hundreds of times with different subjects. The outcomes are already always within a margin of error. And we've done this enough now, Courtney, where we can say, okay, if we know your body weight.
I was going to just ask that. This is what you determine the body weight.
All of this,
yes,
falls into a logical progression of things, even though logic and science are not necessarily the key to figuring out things. Again, I use the example of the bumblebee. His butt is too big and his wings are too small for him to fly logically. But of course, he's never studied aerodynamics, so he flies anyway. But if you can have a measure like that as an example, and there are many others, and you can see consistent results over and over again within a healthy population, now you go to a population that is not healthy. Let's say cancer's there. Let's say strep, staph. Let's say any number of problems can be measured. Again, you'll see this ratcheting up of immune response based on the dose. And don't tell anybody, it doesn't matter if you understand how it works or not. It'll still do what it does. Because we look at placebo as part of the kinds of things that, we look at that as part of, and believe you me, people's brains will bring about changes in their immune system. For example, people who have a lot of angst, today is election day. There's a lot of angst going on. We should have a lot of bottles being consumed, on election day.
They're all waiting for Black Friday, so they're
well, I guess. But people sometimes are not in the best of family situations, not in the best with relationships.
Yeah.
People make plans. Life doesn't cooperate. maybe the loss of a loved one. I mean, any number of things can put us into a real stir, and that's not good for the immune system. At the other extreme, you've got people who are, I would call them grand athletes. Now, they may not be in the Olympics, but they're out there running every day or bicycling every day or going to the gym 4 or 5 times a week. And, you look at them, they're fit, and I know a lot of people like this. But sometimes people overdo it. I've got friends who do this hike for the Make-A-Wish Foundation. It's a 29 mile hike, and they raise money and for doing the hike. Well, in getting ready, they do lots of 3 and 4 and 5 and 20 mile, but the day of that's not really a race. Again, it's a hike. There's a lot of additional physical stress in addition to the mental stress. These things, again, push on the immune system.
It's measurable too.
And it is measurable. That's why I say we can measure before and after. And the after we can measure yet beyond. How long does recovery take? We've looked at things like over the years, some of the published work with this ingredient is with anthrax. Now, a lot of people may not remember, there was some nut maling anthrax around for a while, killed some people, made some people sick. And the U.S. Armed Forces and Canadians and so forth were very interested in our ingredient as to, and you got to understand our armed forces, when they're placed, who knows where, you got bullets flying, they're trying to dig a foxhole, and all of a sudden they got this case of diarrhea. That's one of the #1 problems, believe it or not, when our military goes elsewhere. They give them all these shots for all these things, but then, they don't really do a good job stopping the diarrhea. So imagine if you're that guy or gal, and all of a sudden somebody backs up a big dump truck of garbage and dumps it into your foxhole. This is what we tell people who don't pay attention to the food and drink. You're putting an additional tax on the immune system, and it's not able to do its real job, which is defend you. Again, these things are measurable. These are things that we test over and over and over again. Is it practical for you to go out and run those tests? Probably not, because when they give you the bill, you're gonna be a little bothered. But let me again, I get back to what I started off. It's the results. We've got 6 double-blinded studies on children. Okay, because a number of years ago, with all the work that I've done with cancer, the way you really beat cancer, Courtney, don't get it. And you don't get cancer by getting well ahead of the curve. And we want to do that at the earliest possible age. And so I developed a product called Beta Kids.
Yep.
And that Beta Kids is really helping that immune system be all that it can be, starting at the earliest of ages. And what all of these studies, and I'm not going to go into what all they measured blood work wise, the big thing they came out with that every mom, dad, or caregiver can understand, they miss fewer days from school. You sum it all up, the kid is not there at home suffering, the mom, the dad, the whoever having to stay out of work. It's very costly and stressful situation, not just for the kid, but for the family as well.
That's really the purpose for so many of the childhood vaccines. Isn't so much because they're deadly diseases, but they're inconvenient, to have a child have to stay home and miss. We're not going to go into that conversation, but there are several that are more convenient. Yeah.
So let's say you've got a child that's a couple, 2, 3 years old. Maybe that child's going into, when I was a kid, back in the 50s, you didn't have a lot of pre-K and all these other measures of before you got to the first grade. You got on the bus, you went down and you waited and you got on the bus and you show up and you're in there with, 20, 30 other students, and you get exposed to all the viruses, the bacteria. The building is full of the molds and mildews that grew during the summer months and all the cleaning compounds. And again, the stress of, okay, if your child waits until that point to have their immune system well supported, they're going to be missing a lot of school. I'm sorry. And you don't want to be the parent of a child that is missing a lot of school in those early formative years. Now, if they start, again, a couple of 2, 3 years old, they may get sick, but instead of being down for a week or 10 days, they're over it the next day or so.
Do you think?
Yeah. And so they're building their immunity.
Yeah.
They're building up so that when they start to school, first grade, give or take, it's not that they're bulletproof, but the bullets don't, go very deep, to use an analogy.
I'm thinking from a practical standpoint, if I'm a parent and I only have a budget of, say, $40 a month for supplements for my child or whatever it is, right, and you had to choose from a multivitamin or beta glucan with the added selenium, and I think it's vitamin D in there too.
Vitamin D.
My kids have had periods where we have taken it, and then, or like a probiotic. It seems like beta glucan would really hit the pain points of, keeping my child well enough and boosting their immune system directly versus, I don't know if we're allowed to use boosting the immune system, but for lack of better, not explaining everything scientifically, that's what it does. It enhances the response. So I don't know, I'm thinking out loud for people who may be watching this and going like, well, yeah, another thing I'd have to add. But
here's what I encourage. I'm past the point of, being a new parent. Okay. And now I'm going through the grandparenting thing. Mm-hmm. And you have all this experience and you want to pass it on. Fortunately, my grandchildren have the benefit of my daughter, who I did have, direct hands-on, and a mom course. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean to cast aspersions here, but you don't get all you need at the drive-through restaurant or out of a cardboard box. There is something to be said for food preparation, getting well-balanced meals, not just every once in a while, like when you go to grandma and granddaddy's house. That's for too many people, Courtney, that is the rule rather than the exception.
Yeah.
Grandma and granddaddy, they need to be giving them cake and ice cream. They don't need to be the ones that are giving them
the only place for the home cooked
fresh food.
Yeah.
So getting to the vitamins and minerals, the bulk needs to come from your routine diet. And if you are running into some sort of deficiency, then that really is why you take a supplement, hence the name supplement. Mm-hmm. They are not designed to be your primary source of nutrition. Food needs to be your primary source of nutrition. So I would encourage anybody who is listening to this or hears about it, take this, to heed. It's, these kids, they can't fend for themselves. They've only got what you provide them. And if you provide them with insufficient nutrition, it's going to show up downstream, and it's definitely not going to help them. So very, very important. Right. But the nutrients that you typically get, your vitamin A, B, C, D, E, all the minerals and amino acids and essential fatty acids, None of them do what beta glucan does. How do we know this? Because we've tested it. And so, again, you take that perfectly fed subject that's 100% in health and always, they're at that 30 to 31% immune response. If they take our lower dose product, which in the case of the beta kids, because they shouldn't be 250 pounds at age 3 to 5, okay, that is a dose to probably increase them to around 40 or 50%, which is nearly a doubling of their typical immune response. Again, it doesn't make them bulletproof. They may still occasionally have a problem, but by the time they get to grade school, they're not going to miss those days and weeks like many of their other cohorts. So again, using that as an example, that's how we know that this material works. And to quote one of the researchers, Dr. Václav Vidvica, who just recently retired from the University of Louisville.
His book is like the book.
Well, and he continued to write, and gosh, over 200 studies. He says, look, this stuff works, and it works every time. Okay, you have to take it. You have to take it, but
would you say, if someone asked me and I wanted to sound scientific about beta glucan, would I say it makes your neutrophils more, the receptors more sensitive, or it increases the receptor sites? Or I've heard a lot of this language being thrown out there, or like, you tell me in like your 40-second explanation what exactly happens from a cellular standpoint.
Okay. The immune cells that the beta glucan directly affect have on their surface the CR3. That's complement receptor number 3. There are other surface markers, but that's one of the key. When our molecule locks into that receptor, it's like, we like to use the term activates. It activates that immune cell. And again, younger folks, they'll have to look it up. It turns the Woody Allen immune cells into Schwarzenegger cells. And if you've seen very many Schwarzenegger cells, they do, he does a great job. But that's what you want. You want something that is 100% safe to use on a regular basis. For example, if you took echinacea, for example, on a daily basis, that would be ill-advised, because over time it may cause too much inflammation. Again, an overactivation or an overstimulation or an overboosting, and you don't want that. Now, somebody said, oh gosh, I was in the elevator with somebody that sneezed, and I shook their hand and picked my nose and sucked my thumb, and now I'm feeling kind of sick. Oh, that's when people are grabbing the echinacea. But our product, you could take it on, and your children could take it each and every day, and it's not going to have any ill effect at all, because again,
I can testify.
And you're an example of many. I've got customers who have been using this product over 25 years, every single day at a relatively high dose. Maybe they were a cancer patient, or maybe they went in for some sort of surgery, and they just said, boy, I can't afford not to use this product.
Yeah. I get that.
So it's not also where the immune system grows tired of it. For example, with antibiotics, you could actually develop antibiotic resistant bacteria, so that when you really need that antibiotic, you have overused and abused antibiotics so much, they're not going to affect you. And that's when you're really in trouble.
I'm glad you talked about this, because that was my next question, was how do I know after, I guess at this point, 14 years, I would know. And I have taken breaks, especially over the summer. Some summers I've given myself like a month or two where I haven't, but I always get that kind of feeling a little antsy of I need to get back on. It's just been the one thing I've stayed mostly consistent. My diet's very consistent, mostly plant-based, mostly organic, mostly raw, tons of juicing, tons of smoothies, but lots of, I like how Chris Work says it, recreational foods as well, more so. I'm just a busy mom now. I have 5 kids. I'm expecting my 6th. I've had morning sickness. I've had, all kinds of things that get in the way, but at least I know I have this sort of foundation of beta glucan that I've consistently taken, most years, all years or all months, some years I've taken a few months off, but
And I can look at you as you smile. You also floss and brush your teeth. Okay, so
I did check before this interview. I didn't have a black bean or a piece of lettuce or something in my teeth. So
let's talk about money.
okay, yeah,
a lot of people will say, AJ, and you brought up the topic a while ago that
yeah,
people are spending a certain amount of money for gasoline nowadays, for the food they put on their table, which in some cases have gone up 20-30%, some 40 or 50. Some people, depending on, again, the size of their family, they have to choose what they're putting on the table for their family.
it's true.
And if versus they need to fill the gas tank up to be able to go to work. And that's a sad state of affairs. So let me address, if a person who weighs a certain amount, we make a recommended dose. Okay. It's not a zero-sum deal. It's not, well, okay, if I don't take that dose, it's not going to work. But pay heed to this now. You can take that dose, okay, and what I typically tell people, when you start, use that dose on a daily basis for about 3 or 4 days. Because at day 0, your immune system is wherever it is. It'll take about 72 hours for that dose, whatever that dose is, to peak. And then if you don't take it anymore, it'll take roughly 10 days, it'll vary a little bit, a day or so, to go back to that baseline, okay? To cut your price in half. Again, the person who has to choose whether or not to put the gas in the tank or put food on the table that is fully nutritious for their family, take that recommended dose every other day. Now, what have we seen when that happens? Okay, you get to this particular level and it does this. Okay, a little bit of wiggle, but you stay up there close to the top. A lot of people say, well, I just cut my dose in half. Well, then you only gonna get halfway up the hill. You see it?
Okay, so it's almost like pulsing, like pulse dosing.
We can use that term, but we know, again, because decades of testing subject
I
after
drew this so that I can, so I can.
there you go. The typical dose curve, if you take it, it'll go up and then it'll flatten out and stay there. Well, again, if you can't afford whatever that rate is to take it every day, by skipping every other day.
I know I could go back and listen to this. You said 4 days or so, or 7 days of the full dose.
If you about 3 or 4 days would be enough.
Okay, 3 to 4 days of the full dose, and then start that pulsing every other day.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now
that's a great way to problem solve the.
Yeah, and because I stress, I don't want anyone to learn what we're trying to explain to them about the importance of the immune system. It's going to let a dollar bill have them just, well, I can't afford. Basically, they're saying, I can't afford to cheat. In other words, cancer. You really can't afford to cheat infectious disease. You can't afford, because let me tell you something. In the long run, either your immune system is up to the task or it's not. And even people who have had these conditions, and again, these aren't my numbers, these are numbers generated by the National Institutes of Health, the American Cancer Society, the World Health, all the people that's supposed to know. 1 out of 3 women and 1 out of 2 men will some point in their life be challenged by cancer. Okay. If you have had cancer, the statistics get worse. So when you're sitting in church, the person on the left, the person on the right, or it's you, after long enough, are gonna have that challenge. The guy, if it ain't him, it's gonna be, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The numbers when I was a kid were like 1 out of 6.
Like super rare, right? Like not as heard of. Yeah.
It was, they actually sold cancer policies. You had your general health insurance plans, and they actually offered a cancer policy. It was like $100 a year and paid most expenses over and above what your regular health insurance would pay. Again, statistically, 1 out of 6. You buy a cancer policy today, it ain't $100 a year.
No.
Again, because the actuaries have crunched the numbers and they're not in favor of the stockholders of the insurance company, believe me.
Right. All right. So we have just a little bit more time. First of all, I believe there used to be a website that you could access a lot of the beta glucan studies. That wasn't PubMed. It was a direct website. Do you recommend that?
Yes. In fact, you can't buy anything on there. It's strictly for increasing or speeding up your learning curve. And it is Vita, that's V as in Victor, ITA, Vita with WITH, immunity, IMMUNITY. Vita with immunity. Vita is a Latin term meaning life.
Right.
So life with immunity.
Okay.
VitaWithImmunity.com. Now, I put something on there on the front page, and believe me, it looks a lot different if you're on the telephone as opposed to your home computer. A couple of, I think, really neat videos showing, and they're in a cartoon form. Your kids are going to love them, by the way. That teaches how the immune system works in the face of a bacterial infection, in the face of a viral infection. There's a lot of interviews on there. There are, and again, when I started over 25 years ago, there were about 600 or 700 studies on beta glucan. Now we're approaching something like 198,000.
Yeah.
If you punch in glucan and cancer, you're going to get like 8,000 or 9,000 studies. So this is an area of research that's not what I call a one-hit wonder. There's a lot of things out there say, oh, well, yeah, I got this product, and they had this study said something back in 2008, and there's only been one other study since. While we're sitting here talking, Courtney, there are new studies not only being done, but are being loaded up into medical journal libraries all over the world because new research. For example, now they're talking about TRIM, TRIM. That's an acronym for trained immunity. When you and I first met, I largely talked about the immune system being relatively simple, knowing only the difference in self and non-self. And then after a couple of weeks, you ended up with your B cells and antibodies being a little more specific in how, they're going to address what they came into contact with 2 or 3 weeks ago. Now we're learning that beta glucan actually does what we call training the immune system. So if you've been exposed to beta glucan, and again, I go back to, using it intermittently, let's say, but again, you want to be consistent with that intermittent use. That immune cell remembers. It's not just our neutrophils, by the way. The neutrophils only have a half-life of 6 to 8 hours. Macrophages, or macrophages, depending on which side of the Atlantic you were trained, they live longer. And then you've got other cells, dendritic cells, Kupffer cells, mesangial cells, microglial cells in the brain. All of these cells, some of them have long, long, long lives. And once you've exposed them to beta glucan, they do a better job. And it's not just determining self versus non-self. They actually get smarter. So we're learning that we're not just activating, but we're taking them out of, the lower grades and putting them up into that secondary education, which is really, really important. And again, this is a whole new channel, a whole new pursuit that's just come out within the last couple of years. And as researchers publish, other researchers in other parts of the world read that work and they say, well, that gives me an idea. I want to look into, and they'll look at even different areas. So this is an immunology in general, compared to just wet chemistry and biology, is a relatively new science. I mean, chemistry and biology has been around for thousands of years. Immunology, not even 100 years old. We didn't have the technology. We didn't have the widgets. We didn't have the way to look. Now that we can get down, again, into the tall weeds with the immune system, we can now make heads or tails about whether or not it works. But better yet, we understand how it works. And we also understand how much you need to use to get your maximum of results. That's another beautiful thing. I've talked to some people in the supplement industry, and they say, well, my pill doesn't work. Just start taking twice as much. Okay. Well, no, you need to have a good understanding of the dose to response relationship. What if you're diabetic and they handed you the needle and say, you're just, if you don't feel any better, take twice as much insulin. That's not a good way to go. It's just as important to, if you're going to spend your money, make sure you're spending your money again on something that's safe and is beneficial, and your manufacturer has done the work to demonstrate what and how it works. So.
Okay, last question. And I kind of laugh as I'm asking you this, because those of us that have been taking beta glucan for a long time know that it was extremely annoying to have to wait 30 minutes after we took beta glucan to eat, because we are, if you have cancer and you're taking beta glucan, or you're on whatever protocol, another healing protocol, and you all have all these supplements and you have to space everything out. So is it true? I've heard some rumors that it may not matter that you have to wait 30 minutes. So you put that to rest for good.
All right, let me
Do we have to wait 30 minutes to eat after taking beta glucan? Go.
Here has been my advice for as far back as I remember. Best if taken on an empty stomach. Now, does that mean you get no result if you take it with your coffee, with your tea? You do shakes, kids do Jello. If you're going to put something, put it in what I would call a liquid, or something that is going to liquefy by the time it gets to the stomach. Now, and you were in one of my meetings when I said, just don't put it in the middle of a double beef Whopper with cheese, okay? Because again, you're looking at an area of the gut where it's taken up through the Peyer's patches, those are limb cells, and they're sampling the mayonnaise and the pickles and the tomatoes and all that stuff. And again, you're paying good money. You want to get the maximum of benefit. So again, best if taken on an empty stomach, but that doesn't mean you can't put it in any kind of beverage or yogurt or something like, because again, by the time it gets to the bottom of your belly, it's all liquefied anyway.
So what I'm hearing from you is we should make our best effort to take it with water and then wait 30 minutes to get the best effect for our investment, right? And for what we're dealing with, we want.
Or it could be tea, it could be coffee. In other words, a liquid.
A liquid, not a, but a smoothie would be a little more chunky and maybe a little more digestion going on there. So anyway, I wouldn't take mine with a smoothie, but sometimes I don't wait the full 30 minutes to where I'm like, I've got to, eat something or
But
whatever.
again, that's not going to negate 100% of the effect.
Right. So it's better
Again,
some effect than nothing.
I'd like to say, though, for best benefit, and this was an argument, by the way, in some researchers 25, 30 years ago, was, you can put this stuff all you want to in your mouth, it's not going to be taken up. And we actually did the work to prove. What we did was we radio labeled so it would light up under a scope the material, and we tracked it through the alimentary canal, and we saw the day after, 2 days after, 3 days after, these little round, areas that glowed under the scope. When we looked at the liver, we looked at the spleen, we looked at the bone marrow, we looked at it, and those little balls started breaking down, getting smaller and smaller, until ultimately it's breaking down into a molecule. You can't see a molecule; it's too small. We can measure it, but mixing it with solid foods, again, probably not the best way to maximize your dose. And you don't have any idea how many millions of questions relative. Well, what if my steak is medium rare as opposed to?
Yeah.
Will that make any?
It would be done just slightly easier than a well done steak, right? The living foods people will say eat raw meat because it, you're like, whoa, I don't know. That's
sushi. Get your sushi.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This was fun. I love where our conversation went, and you answered all my questions that I wanted to pick off this list, and I so appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much. And you mentioned Dr. Vetvika's book.
Yeah.
This will be a bit of a surprise for you. The people that come and enjoy your presentations, you gather up their names and addresses, and you call me in a couple of weeks, and I'll send you some free books.
What?
So that you can get people, again, a little tuned up from the neck up. It'll be my little gift to you and them to christen our first, inaugural visit together.
Yeah, this is fun. Okay, well, we'll talk about that off the record here.
Okay.
But anyway, hope you have a wonderful November and Thanksgiving and all those things here in the States, and we will chat again soon.
You be safe. Take care.
All right, thanks.